Morning, everyone, and welcome to the National Capital Planning Commission. I'm Marcel Acosta, the Executive Director of the Commission. I'd like to welcome you to today's event. We really have a full schedule of some very interesting and innovative and thought-provoking presentations this morning. We'll start with a presentation by Ana Gelabert-Sanchez. If there's a theme tying this morning's presentations together, it's innovation and implementation. People coming up with creative planning ideas and doing the hard work to figure out how to make them happen. I think that you find that this describes Ana Gelabert-Sanchez perfectly. Ana was planning director for Miami from 1998 to 2010, where she led the Miami 21 plan and rezoning initiative to make Miami a more sustainable, pedestrian-friendly, and better planned city. Miami is the first major city to adopt form-based zoning codes on a citywide basis, and Miami 21 also won numerous awards, including the American Planning Association's National Planning Award for Best Practice in 2011. She also led several major planning efforts, including the Museum Park Master Plan, the Coconut Grove Master Plan, and the Parks and Public Spaces Master Plan in Miami. She led the review and approval of more than 75,000 residential units, approximately 6,000 hotel rooms, over 8 million square feet of office space and 7 million square feet of retail space, contributing to Miami's greatest growth in their history. Ana has recently completed a Loeb Fellowship at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design, and she is currently a design critic at the Urban Design and Planning program at the Design School this semester. Ana was named Top Public Official of the Year for 2010 by Governing Magazine and received the CNU Groves Award on Leadership and Vision in 2011. So that's quite remarkable, a set of accomplishments. We're really pleased to have her here. I think you'll find her presentation really engaging, and I think really innovative because there are very few places that have attempted to do form-based codes at this scale, and I think it's a pretty remarkable feat that they had an idea and they took it all the way to implementation, and it really is one of the most provocative and innovative planning efforts out there. So please join me in welcoming Ana Gelabert-Sanchez to NCPC.
Thank you, Marcel. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marcel, and thank you for having me here. I will show you what we did in Miami. At times, I apologize if at times it's too obvious, since I understand that the people here are planners and people that understand. But for Miami was to say that it was an incredible accomplishment. It's an understatement because for everyone that knows Miami, it's a great city, but we are trying to make it walkable. We had two things, and I think I always owe it to before I give the presentation, to two things that made it really happen. And one was vision that we had. I enjoyed the opportunity of working with a mayor who had the vision and the political leadership to spearhead and back the planning department in making this happen, which was not an easy thing. And also, we also had a great team of people that we were able to work with. We work with the firm of DPC, Duane Platter Syberg. I know they have offices here. We had attorneys, and we actually had another firm who's also from DC, ERA, working with us on the economic component of it. So we had key players, we had a good team, and I was fortunate to have a great department and great staff that was able to make this happen. So with that, I would like to start on the presentation. Hopefully I'll know how to, Julia told me how to click it. Miami. This slide is kind of very telling for us. This is what transpired from the moment we started thinking about Miami 21. We started, it took us 5 years, and that is the growth of, as we were engaging on Miami 21, this amount of development. It was unprecedented. The development is true for the rest of the nation, but in Miami, it was just booming. I tell this story that many times as I was going to work in downtown, at one time I counted just in the core, it was 32 cranes of the high-rises that were coming up. The development, as Marcel said, this is what was seeing, the 75, the hotels, the office, the retail, the large scale. And why was that important? It's key because sometimes when you decide to change gears and say what we have, we're seeing this development, but it's not what we want. The amount of permits and amount of applications that we were seeing, but the projects that we were seeing on the ground, Miami is very pro-development, has always been, but what we were seeing coming into the ground was not really the type of legacy that we wanted to leave. It was a code that was allowing many things that it was not something to be proud of. And that's why I started saying, and it was the political leadership to a moment where you're seeing so much growth, be able to say, we're changing gears. So it was, the best way I could describe it was trying to derail a moving train. As the development kept going, as the permits kept going, we were mending the code. Miami 21, let me go back. This one is kind of, I think by now it's maybe, I don't know if I've been saying it so long that it's obvious, but Miami 21, 21st century, it was an overhaul of the former zoning regulations. It's a form-based code, but I also want to clarify for those in the audience that might be more familiar with the form-based code, what we have is a hybrid form-based code. We dealt with form, but we also had to deal with uses. Given that it was a citywide, we could just not disregard. And it does apply smart growth principles. So those were key issues that we were wanting to make sure that Miami 21 was able to capture. Why Miami 21? In the city of Miami, and I'm not as familiar with this, so you might share the same horror stories, but for us, we wanted to make sure that we had clear and specific guidelines. We wanted to promote development. We wanted to have an efficient permit process. We wanted to make sure that people could come and know exactly what we wanted, that they didn't feel that we were negotiating every single project. But Miami's old code had been amended a series of times. Every time it was just a patchwork. It was every amendment added 10 more pages to the code, which was unreadable. There was an article, Article 9, which we would use to call it the black hole. When you couldn't find it, it was there. And the attorneys, the land use attorneys, and no offense if there's any here, were the only ones that could really decipher what that code was and what was Article 9. We wanted to create on the code, and these are the things that were important to us, the strong sense of place. We wanted to promote the compact and mixed-use communities. We wanted to create the range of housing opportunities. Walkable neighborhoods was key to us. To preserve the open space, we actually, on this particular one, we were also fortunate that as part of Miami 21, we did the first Parks Master Plan for the city of Miami. So this one came under the umbrella of Miami 21. The decisions that were predictable, fair, and cost-effective, that was key to us because, like I said, we are pro-development. We wanted to see it. We just wanted to see the right development. And we did not want to create the anxiety of someone coming in and thinking that they didn't know what is it that, people would come and sit with me and say, I'll do it. What do you want? And many times that shouldn't be it. I mean, it shouldn't be. I was saying it shouldn't be the director of the department. It shouldn't be the mayor of the department. It should be just the rules should be clear. It doesn't matter who's sitting at the table. And they encouraged the community stakeholder collaboration. That was also important. As many communities around the nation, the public participation has become key, and the community in Miami, when they saw the boom happening, it just, overnight, they saw high-rises coming next to their houses, and they were just totally flipped. They thought government had changed that overnight, and we had sneaked that change of use without them knowing. We had to go out and prove that, in fact, it had been done 15 years ago. They just, development hasn't. So at this time that this is happening, everyone is, the communities are going to their commissioners, they're coming to us, and everyone's freaking out. That's how we just said, this is wrong, how do we change it? Why wasn't? Well, we had an Euclidean zoning code, which obviously goes against everything that we were trying to promote. It was one size fits all. We have, in Miami, we have many communities, all of them with a particular character. We have a very strong single family, a very strong financial district. Everyone is very distinct, yet the rules are the same for everyone. So it didn't really matter if you were in a commercial corridor that was abutting a single family, or you were a commercial corridor abutting high-density residential. you still had 150 units per acre, and pretty much you could do, height was unlimited. This is the result, and this is, that one is a slide that I came fond of when I had someone in the press tell me, that did it for me. So I said, sometimes we talk and we say how the rules have to change, but then you just show one image. And this is what was happening in Miami, and this was allowed. So there was nothing illegal. That's a small duplex. The high-rise that you see is abutting a commercial corridor, and it's 150 units per acre. And the wall, the garage that is exposed, everything was allowed under the old code. So needless to say, there was really no transitions. The other issues we had in our code was, and this is a small area just to depict the problem we were having, the land use is obviously, we still obviously continue having land use map, but the special district, the neighborhood conservation district, 22 zoning designations in an area that might be, it's Coconut Grove, let's see, it's a very small neighborhood that has a small commercial heart and residential. Within that area, we had 22 zoning designations. So clearly, you needed a land use attorney to be able to tell you what it is that you could do. That not only created an anxiety, again, to the neighbors. In one particular property, you could have the SD18, the SD3, and then the overlay. That was just to say, what is it that you can do? There were other limitations, and when we were sitting and going through the whole map, it was like everything had names and last names. It was like history. This is the so-and-so amendment. This is the so-and-so amendment, and it was a horror story. But this is just in a very, very small and very stable area of the city. The other problem we're having is, years ago, the city wanted to be able to encourage development. We're talking about 20 years ago or so. So we did something that is different than any other municipality. What you see on your far right is how you really calculate the net lot area on your FAR. Well, in Miami, we thought we have to give a little more than the other municipalities that are abutting us, so we're going to consider your property will go to the middle of the street. And if you are in front of the water, you can go 90 feet into the water and consider yours in order to calculate how much you could build. If you were next to a park, you can also move on to that area. Then you had the PUD. PUD is the plan unit development. Somehow, somewhere, that got lost. It should have been for low density, but it started applying to high rises. And that was free. That was just in the asking. And finally, affordable housing, which was the only good thing, but not enough. You couldn't charge enough to really make it happen for the city. So at the end of the day, a project could end up with close to 50% more than what they really had in their property, just on the rules that we had already in place. So it was legal, but the problem, and this is a real building, this is not an exaggeration, this actually came, and we just analyzed it because it was, it kind of took everything that possibly could be given. So that's why, and then next to it, what you have, this is a mid-density residential neighborhood, but it was abutting some single-family residential. But this problem that I depicted, it was true for anywhere in the city. What we wanted to do with the form-based code, and that's why we went to the form-based code, it was the outcome we wanted, the goals, the mixed use. We wanted to promote the walkability. We wanted to promote transit. We wanted more intensity on some areas. We wanted mixed use. We wanted transitional zones. We wanted a predictable physical result. That was key because what the planning department had was a design review. But again, the planning department only reviews maybe 25% of the whole city. We review that is in a special area or if it requires a special permit. If not, and a building can go through the building department and get it approved without any design review. And many times, we could adjust or work with someone to give me transitions, but it really became as a conversation, as a negotiation, project by project. And like I said a little while ago, it wasn't that I wanted to have the planning department of my position to be in power. I frankly would like to have rules that applied everywhere, citywide, even if the department was seeing it or not, and take the bureaucracy out of it. And the politics. The two things, the goals was the conservation and the development, the two things that don't seem to go hand in hand, but that was probably what took us so long. It was the conservation of it. It was important to preserve the neighborhoods. That's strong. Most of what we have is the single-family neighborhoods. We needed to work with the neighbors, the commercial corridors, as I said. We needed to conserve what we had. We have to preserve and protect. Yet, we also wanted to have development. So how did those two can come together? And these are just images that are kind of self-explanatory. This is what we have, this is what we want, and we just made, we were showing them to show people what is it that we wanted. There was an analysis that we had to get done. Like I said, Miami is made of many neighborhoods. There's a Haitian community, there's a strong African-American community, there's a very strong Hispanic community, there's the Anglo community, there's a health district, there's a downtown, and everyone feels that their neighborhood should be unique. There's the consideration of transit, as I said. We wanted to, there's things that are already happening, other ones where we're projecting that they will happen. How do we get ready for the land use and zoning in order for that to happen? There was, and this was the challenge on a city-wide and a city that is already built, we had to do a lot of analysis of what property, we have a very strong Property Rights Act. So to us, it was very important to make sure that the development that someone had, we needed to make sure that they got the same amount or close to the same amount of development capacity, because that's where the lawsuits could have come. That was the issues come out. So we were trying to avoid being in a position where government was doing any takings, yet we were able to say, I always said, well, we were describing, I'm just giving you a different bag, I'm giving you the same bag of goods, it's just you have to fit them in a different envelope. And to us, it wasn't you getting more, you probably would be getting more uses. It's just there would be a height restriction depending where you were, there were setbacks restrictions that depending when you were, so we were able to manipulate that. But the development capacity was an exercise that probably took us a lot of time. We had no issues with that through the, I guess I would say the job was well done, because when the challenge and the question came, we were able to prove that we in fact had not done anything of that sort. Only the properties that were in the water probably did not have as much, but clearly they knew the water wasn't theirs to start with, so that was already a benefit that they were getting. Other than that, we were pretty conscious about those decisions. This is the Transect. We have done ours based on a Transect. We changed the whole nomenclature, and we wanted to make that difference going from the Euclidean code into the form-based code, and we did follow the Transect zone. And that gave us the ability, and I think I have a map that shows, it looked like a tapestry, but we went out to the neighborhoods and saw what is it that's happening, what is it that should be happening, what is it that the zoning is allowing, and because of the Transect, we were able to kind of put it, for example, on that diagram, the area that is on the magenta color, that's higher density. As it moves back, it starts going lower. What you have on the far left corner is duplex and single family. So how do we create that transition? Again, in some cases, the community was willing to upzone that area, other parts we needed to do the transition within the private commercial property because the residents did not want to have the domino effect change. So the Transect and the analysis and the challenge, because it's a citywide, gave us that opportunity, but it also, there was a lot of work that we needed to do at the neighborhood level. The Transects, this is how we have it. It's the T1s are the conservation. The T2, we don't really have it. Miami doesn't have agricultural. The T3 is single family and duplex. T4 is a new one that Miami does not have, which allows us to create that transition. If you think back to that other slide that I have with the little house on the big high-rise, it's kind of a 3-story townhouse type of a building. The ones above are images from Miami. The ones below are Miami-Dade. But that was important for us to be able to show, but it was because it was kind of showing the people visually. When we said T4, which is a very technical term, they could see what a T4 was. Or a T5, it was the 5-story building, and the T6, it went from T6 8 stories, all the way to 80 stories, which was downtown, the T6 being most urban. And the DD district, it would be the industrial districts and the health. The other thing we did, and go back to why it was a hybrid, This is what we did. So we have the transects, we have the numbers that I just showed you, and then we have the letters, the RLO. R would be restricted, so you could have a T4, 3-story, only residential. L would be limited. It meant that you have limited commercial. In a 3-story, only the ground level could be commercial. In a 24-story, 8 stories, for example, could be commercial. The limited is, why did we do that? There's some areas we were doing a more compact, more density, more intense, but because all the neighborhoods are different, some neighborhoods were were ready to go for the full mixed use. Other ones needed a transitions that we needed to go from the whole mixed use to some limited, some residential. So in that graduation, that's how we were able to do it, not only in form, but we were able to do it in use. And then the O is the full mixed use they can have, and most likely a lot of these properties gain more uses because of the form-based code. And then, and this is the map that I was mentioning before, which it looks like a tapestry, but it was really extremely useful to us. In the part above, for those of you who have been in Miami, that's the Alapata area. It used to be all industrial. Industrial, as many of you know, does not allow for residential. We changed that, and we created a new category that allows for some residential to create the work-live. So the same as Wynwood, which, again, there's a lot of an artist community that's coming in. It used to be industrial. They couldn't do it. And we were able to make it happen that they would do it without creating the change of zoning that was happening before, people going and asking for a zoning change that would be a total mixed use, which residential doesn't really blend in with industrial. So we had that difference with the form-based code. We were able to manipulate it and be able to create what it should be there. The new categories that we were able to create was the T3L, which is a granny flat. It's still single family, but we allow for that. That was a good thing because that allows us, it was a good way of affordable housing. There's a lot of neighborhoods in the inner city that people were being displaced just because eventually they could not afford their house and they needed to move out. By allowing this category, it still continues to be single family, but they can do it as long as there's some rules in place. They have to live in the property. They can rent it, but they have to own the property and they have to live in the property. It also allows us, there's some historic properties that in the 20s were done and allowed it. Well, the old code did not allow it anymore, so we were able to do it. This category really came neighborhood by neighborhood. Some people did want it, some people did not want it, so people actually, the majority voted if they wanted the L or not. And that's how it was decided. The 4 is the one that I was saying. It's that transition between the low and the high density, which we didn't have, not only in form, but in use. We were able to do it. And the D1 is the one that also I mentioned, which we call light industrial, which is for work-live. This one is one that we actually gave in a little bit with the developers. We started with 18 units per acre. They wanted 72. I think we came down to 36. I figure, and I know the staff was having concerns saying, why are we giving them so much? And I said, well, we're not the developers. We're not in the private sector. We need to trust that the market, they know what the market is demanding. So we cannot just do something that it doesn't work because then we haven't accomplished anything. So it didn't go to 72 because we felt that it would be, again, more of residential, more of the speculation. The community in this particular neighborhood did not want more, so the 36 seemed to work in the sense that it will continue being a work-live, work being the major use, and then the residential. So we would allow for that to happen. Obviously, we also had to change the land use on it. The development capacity, we made it simpler. If you remember the one where I saw the building kind of grows. The way we have it now, it's easy. If you have, for example, a D6A with an FLR, which is the equivalent to an FAR of 5, you just multiply it, and that's what you have. That's the capacity. It used to be that you multiply it, but then in Miami, for example, parking did not count towards your FAR, lobbies did not count, hallways did not count. I mean, by the end of the exercise, you don't really know, half the building didn't count. So that's where you didn't really know what it was that you were having. On this one, we basically said, it's easy, this is how the calculation. That calculation was done, and we probably erred in the side of caution and gave, when we did the development capacity calculations and we were, under, we just went a notch a little higher, just to make sure that we were not taking away anything. We were giving someone, so we are on the side of more instead of less. And the key was, because now parking counts towards your FLR. So before it didn't, and that was probably in Miami, the most growing pains, because we need cars, and parking is never counted. So sometimes you could have a building that would be 15 stories just in the parking podium. Now they had to, again, it was a mindset. We were giving you the same capacity, but now you had to count the parking. And that was important because what we were saying, what our thought was, you'll think twice if you want 15 stories of podium or you want sellable space, and then we'll figure about, we're trying to create also a need to try to promote the transit that we so much need. These are some examples of how it reads. Also, the purpose of the code was to make it easy, to make it, so if you have a T4, basically on the chart on the left-hand side, you go down the uses. If it has an R, it's by right. If it has E exception, and I think a W is a warrant administrative, E is obviously a public hearing. But the important thing is that most of them are R's, which means right, which means if a project comes in and follows the code, there's no public hearing involved, to which the developer, that was something that they appreciated, because then they didn't have to spend a whole year in 3 different public hearings. To us, we're really not about holding you up. It's about doing the code. And for the community, well, the community knew what the code was asking, so there was no guessing game. If they were next to, say a T6A, they knew exactly what that building would look like, or how much can they go. It would not go more than 8 stories if it was next to a single family. That was the rule. No height variance. So that, again, we were trying to kind of meet both, where we preserved the neighborhood, but we also facilitated on the other side of development. So we did put the rules in, but we thought that by relaxing, by removing public hearings, because they were abiding by the rules, it was a win-win. And then the T68, again, these are just images, the uses. The lot area, pretty much you can go to one part of the code, and that's what your area. So you look at the map, it's easy to follow. Here there's some images of the ones above are obviously existing buildings, things that can happen, that are there, that are built, and the ones below is the images that we were showing as to with the new code. This is the transitions that we were creating. This is also something that is the face of the building. The one on your left-hand side is built. That's a parking garage. That's a major street at Biscayne Boulevard, facing the park and facing Biscayne Bay. And that's a building with garage, and there's nothing behind that shrubbery here. Let me see here. This is just blank and shrubs. I always say it's like a paper holder, a garbage collector of a suburban rule of leaving a setback with green that is totally useless. What we did on this building is following the rules that Miami 21 implemented. We asked for what we call liners and retail at the ground level. So if you're on a primary, you need to line the building. If you are on the your secondary side, but you line at 50%. But the ground level has to be active. And we said habitable. We didn't say retail because we understand you cannot put retail in every single street, but it had to be habitable. This one is the same type of requirement. The one on the left is, like you see, is built. And the one on the right is built too, but that one first came to us without the liner. And we said, we're not approving it, it has to have a liner, and they put the units, which in many cases they have sometimes done it as affordable housing, because the units obviously are a little bit narrower, a little bit more on the ground, but it has worked for that. If it's an office, some people have used it as a conference room. So there's many uses. Again, what we call it is habitable, but it clearly gives another face. And this one I always, for a view that might recognize, we had some artistic license and borrowed Michigan Avenue in Chicago to kind of show the one above is built here. This building came, asked for a special exception, promised that they would do every single thing that we were going to be asking for. Obviously, once they got the zoning change, they did not. There was nothing that we could force them to do. So as a reaction to that, what we were saying was this code is now dealing with, one is the public realm, but it's also dealing with the private realm and creating a better space. This code, and I don't have a slide here, but it's also the other innovative thing that it does is that the public realm usually is in the jurisdiction of the Public Works Department. We have created guidelines that say what streets should look like based on what transect are you facing, and the city is actually continues being in the jurisdiction of the Public Works Department, but they are now, the regulations are our regulations based on the form-based code. And then how to use the code, it was something you just basically, and this is was to show it's an easier process, it's not a guessing game. You go to the map, you look at what transect do you have. Article 3 is pretty much the general transect zoning regulations. You look at what your uses are. The uses are here, they're all on one page. You don't have to be looking back and forth. Here it says what you can. These are the densities we've also included, which is controlled by the comprehensive plan in the case of Miami. But basically, it's a matrix. You look, if it's blank, it means you cannot do it, so don't ask. It's not allowed. And then on Article 5, which is building disposition, which obviously deals with setbacks, primary and secondary. And finally, when you go to the additional requirements, there's some uses that needed additional requirements, things as big boxes that might be coming to the city, those type of uses that have created anxiety in the past. The same as adult entertainment, which was another touchy issue. Those things needed to kind of have additional, but it's not all the uses. And finally, the procedures, which is what the private side liked, which was basically you come in, and if you do it by right, you just get a building permit. The rest is if you need a warrant, it's administrative, meaning the planning department gets to see it. If it's a public hearing, it's an exception. You are deviating from the rules, then it is a public hearing. You still can do it, but you need to go for a public hearing. Zoning and land use changes, as by the law, is a public hearing. And then basically these are images of what we did, the before and after of what we were trying to promote. I'm dealing with the private and public. And then, as I always say, Miami 21, it's more than a code. It dealt with sustainability. We require that all buildings that are 50,000 feet or more are LEED certified. If you do more than that, you get a bonus. If you're less than 50 and do it, you get a bonus. So we're trying to kind of, successional zoning is the other thing, another protection. In Miami, you used to be able to go from a single family, 9 units per acre, to a zoning change of 150 units per acre just in the asking. We are not allowing that anymore. It's a successional zoning, meaning if you have a T5, you can only go for a T6. If you're a T4, you can only go to a T5. You cannot ask if you're a T4, you cannot go for a T6. It's just not allowed. Transfer of development rights, another thing that we did not have, and we do it for historic properties. Because we have many, and we do have also a historic district that had limitations, we did not want to penalize, we wanted to promote. So what we're saying is if you're in a historic property, or you are architectural, or you have significant architectural character, you can apply for the transfer of development rights. We had a public benefits program, which I have some slides to show, and then the special area plans. The sustainability is the one I just described of the 50. The successional is the protection to the neighborhoods. The other thing I failed to mention is it can occur only twice a year instead of monthly, which, again, every public hearing there was a zoning change. And that's why the community was getting concerned, because they said, we have our daily jobs. Ours shouldn't be to be here wondering if the land use attorneys are going to get that zoning change next to my house. So we limited what they could do, and limited to how many times they could do it. Transfer of development rights, the ones I've just described. Public benefits, that was something that we're happy with, because with the public benefits, we did it two things. We did it is for affordable parks, open space, green buildings. But basically what we say is there's three ways you can meet this requirement. Either you, as the city would rather have, you build it on site, because we would have, in the case of affordable housing, for example, we would like to have the mixed income happening on site. If you do that, we're giving you twice as much as you're giving us in bonus. Again, you cannot exceed the height, you cannot exceed the form-based code. You still have to abide by the rules. You just are not paying for them. You just could build on it. If you want to build it somewhere else, that's also allowed, but then you get one-on-one, one-for-one. Or if you don't want either, then you contribute money. The way we did the contribution, and that's where we did an analysis, it used to be that Miami had, it was $12.27, something like that, anywhere in the city. So you could be in the poor area or the rich area, that's what you paid. We changed that to say it depends how much, we calculate how much are you selling your square footage. So if you were in the financial district, it was an X amount, say $25, versus if you were in Little Havana, which was, certainly not the financial district, then it was $12. So there was a differentiation depending where you were, depending how much it was costing you the land. Well, it should be fair. And that is a process that will change. Yearly, there would be a review by a third party, not the city. If when the economy goes up, then the prices go up. If the economy goes down, the prices should go down. So it should reflect what's happening. So, and again, this was the case of trying to be fair. The idea of the height and where the benefits come into play is that on the T6s only, you have the 812 and the 20. The number you have on the left is what's allowed. With what's on the right is what you can go up to if you ask for public benefits. So, for example, if you have a T612, you can go up to 20 stories. 12 is by right, 20 is by, you have to get it through the public benefits. That means we either get the affordable housing as I was describing, or you pay, or or you build it. But that was, and the height limitation was important because, again, it was the predictability that the neighbors knew. The one exception here is the 8. If you were abutting a single family or a duplex, you could not avail yourself of the bonuses. It was 8 stories and that was it. The 8 up to 12 is you were abutting a 12 or something else. And the civic spaces was also another thing important if you had in an area of need, and that's why we had the Parks Master Plan. If whatever you gave, you get twice as much. If not, it would go back to the same ratio of 1-to-1. This one also in the code, we specified what the public open space was. So it wasn't just giving me the leftover of the green space, but if you wanted to qualify for a plaza bonus, the plaza had to be half an acre. There were sizes attached to them and location. That was important because in the past we really were getting, kind of the leftover that no one was building and calling a green space and get a bonus for that. So we were able to kind of match what with what, but the areas of need were important. As there's, in Little Havana, in Little Haiti area, there's great need for parks, open space, and the city doesn't have the funding. This allowed it. And finally, the special area plans, which was, as much as we want, we cannot anticipate everything. So we worked on creating something that said, if you have more than 9 acres, you can come and request a special area plan. That means that it has to go through city council approval. It has to go through the planning department's approval. It's like a master plan, but you were able to get different transects, meaning different heights. Basically, we're allowing you to create a master plan within your 9 acres. There's a lot of requirements of civic spaces, the public realm, that they have to build in order to get it. But we feel the city gains, and the developer also, and the property owner is also able to have the flexibility, given that it's 9 acres, again, with city commission approval. And on this one, I was saying before to Marcel, we're having, right now, I think 1 got approved that was on the paper on the Miami Herald property, and I think we have 3 more coming on the special area plans. And then finally, the public involvement, which was tremendous. This process took us 5 years. We thought naively that it would be 3 years. But there was a lot of public participation. We had over 500 meetings in the community. We had stakeholder meetings. We met with the architects. We met with developers. We met with attorneys, always with the residents as part of was the common denominator. So when we set out with this, what is it that you want? We went out to the community. We explained what we were doing. We came back. They said what they wanted. We came back. So it was a process that was very lengthy, but it was required because this was a plan that everyone needed to be able to embrace and feel comfortable, that they were giving something up, but they knew that it was their plan. The website, too, that was also important the first time around. We had a very technical website. We had to revamp that to something friendlier and something that basically explained to people, why is it that you want it? Why is it that why do you need this code for the person who's not a planner? We went out to the media. Every community is different. The Haitian community is more interested in the radio. The African American community is more interested in going to the Civic, to the churches, to the schools. The Latin community, we had to go to the radio too. So we needed to do that outreach and be able to go in Creole, in Spanish, obviously in English, and be able to reach out. And the other thing we had to do was through the website, we had questions. People could post questions, and we would give them an answer. It was kind of like live. I mean, they were no more than 24 hours, they would get an answer to their question. And that was also an undertaking. But there was a commitment that we wanted to make sure that the process was as transparent as possible and that everyone felt. In few occasions, we even had to put out a red line of the code so people could actually physically see that we had taken their comments and we had made those changes happen. So I think that public participation is what really stretched it to the 5 years. You know, writing the rules, it wasn't probably as complicated as it was about reaching out and making sure everyone was part of it. And finally, this one, which is, we started at, which I'm sure you know. Any questions? Thank you very much.